There is a before and an after, a dividing line in the cultural consciousness that separates the myth we were sold from the reality we were forced to confront. For nearly 2 decades, Ellen DeGeneres was the undisputed queen of daytime television, the architect of a sun-drenched, feel-good empire built on a simple, powerful mantra: be kind. Her show was a daily sanctuary of laughter, celebrity hijinks, and life-changing giveaways, a place where the host's signature dance and disarming quirkiness made her seem like a benevolent friend in millions of living rooms. She was an easy icon to adore, a trailblazer who had survived a career crucifixion in the 1990s after bravely coming out, only to stage one of Hollywood's most remarkable comebacks. Her public persona was that of a quirky, generous, and profoundly decent human being, a testament to the power of resilience and kindness. However, in the summer of 2020, this meticulously constructed edifice did not just crack, it imploded with a speed and finality that stunned the world. And while the public unraveling seemed to happen in the 60 seconds it took for a viral article to ignite global outrage, the truth is that the stage had been set for years. The first part of Ellen DeGeneres' story is the chronicle of her meteoric rise and the careful cultivation of a brand so powerful that its eventual collapse was not just a fall from grace, but a catastrophic system failure, revealing the profound perils of building an empire on a paradox. The architecture of Ellen's success was a masterclass in rebranding and emotional engineering. To understand the height of her fame, one must first appreciate the depth of her professional grave. In 1997, at the peak of her sitcom's success, Ellen DeGeneres made television history. In a heavily promoted episode of Ellen titled The Puppy Episode, her character, Ellen Morgan, came out as a lesbian. More significantly, DeGeneres herself came out publicly on the cover of Time magazine with the headline, "Yep, I'm gay." It was a courageous, unprecedented moment for LGBTQ+ visibility in mainstream media. The backlash was swift, brutal, and professionally devastating. The show, while initially garnering massive ratings for the coming out episode, was quickly engulfed in controversy. Sponsors fled, right-wing groups protested, and ABC, nervous about the content, began slapping parental advisory warnings on episodes. The network canceled the show a year later. For all intents and purposes, Ellen DeGeneres was unemployable. The industry that had celebrated her comedy had turned its back, punishing her for her honesty. She was, in her own words, not invited to any parties, a pariah in the town that had once embraced her. This period of exile is crucial to understanding the persona that would later dominate daytime TV. The Ellen that emerged from the wilderness was not the same one who entered it. The experience had been traumatic, teaching her a brutal lesson about the limits of mainstream acceptance and the fickle nature of the entertainment industry. When she began her comeback, it was not as a political firebrand or an activist, but as a purveyor of pure, harmless, apolitical fun. Her triumphant return was signaled by her hosting of the Emmy Awards in 2001, and then, more permanently, by the launch of The Ellen DeGeneres Show in 2003. The timing was providential. In a post-9/11 America yearning for comfort and distraction, her show was positioned as a daily dose of uncomplicated joy. The mission statement was simple: to dance, to play, and to be kind. The Be Kind mantra became the absolute cornerstone of her brand. It was genius in its simplicity and marketability. It was printed on merchandise, echoed by guests, and embedded in the show's DNA through generous acts and a relentless focus on positivity. This was not just a talk show, it was a moral philosophy sold to the public. Her on-screen persona was meticulously calibrated: the goofy dancer, the animal lover, the relatable friend who just happened to be a global superstar. She presented herself as humble, approachable, and deeply empathetic, often sharing stories that highlighted her own vulnerabilities and triumphs. The public, many of whom remembered her courageous stand and subsequent exile, were eager to root for her. Her success felt like a victory for the underdog, a just reward for someone who had been wronged. The industry, too, embraced this new, safe Ellen. She was no longer a threat, she was a profit center. A-list celebrities lined up to bask in her show's positive aura, knowing it was a safe space for good publicity. For years, the machine operated flawlessly. The show won a staggering 30 Daytime Emmy Awards. DeGeneres became a billionaire, a lifestyle mogul, and a powerful force whose endorsement could launch products and careers. The kingdom was built, and Ellen was its beloved queen. However, beneath the shimmering, perfectly lit surface of dancing and giveaways, the first faint whispers of dissonance began to circulate. A brand built on the promise of universal kindness is an impossibly high standard for any human being or organization to maintain. The first cracks were not seismic, but hairline, often dismissed as the inevitable grumblings of a large workforce or the fabrications of disgruntled former employees. In 2014, a comedian named Greer Barnes wrote a viral blog post titled, "Ellen is not nice," detailing a cold, dismissive interaction with her. It was a small story, but it stood out precisely because it contradicted the overwhelming public narrative. It was an anomaly that the public's cognitive dissonance quickly suppressed. A more significant tremor arrived in 2018 when comedian Kevin T. Porter posted a tweet that would later be seen as prophetic. "Right now, we all need a little kindness," he wrote, in a tone that mimicked Ellen's show. "You know, like Ellen DeGeneres always talks about. She's also notoriously one of the meanest people alive. Respond to this with the most insane stories you've heard about Ellen being mean, and I'll match every one to $2 to LLA Food Bank." The tweet went viral, amassing thousands of responses. The stories ranged from the petty, allegedly ignoring fans, to the more serious, including accounts from former staffers about a toxic work environment. At the time, however, this was largely treated as an internet meme, a cynical joke. The Be Kind brand was so powerful, so deeply embedded in the cultural psyche, that these allegations were unable to gain serious traction. They were like shadows, visible but intangible, easily dismissed in the bright light of her daytime kingdom. Yet, these digital murmurs were the early tremors of a coming earthquake. They suggested that the environment behind the scenes was not one of universal kindness, but one governed by a different set of rules. The stories, though anecdotal, pointed to a pattern, a stark contrast between the public-facing generosity and a private behind-the-camera culture of fear, intimidation, and rigid control. The show's fun culture was allegedly a facade for a high-pressure, punitive environment where staffers were discouraged from speaking to Ellen directly and lived in constant anxiety about their jobs. The narrative of Ellen as a benevolent, hands-on leader was being directly challenged by those who claimed to have witnessed the opposite. The empire was showing signs of internal rot, but the outer walls were still gleaming. The dance went on, and the audience, for the most part, remained blissfully unaware. The stage was being set for a collapse of biblical proportions, waiting, only for a catalyst to bring the entire carefully constructed illusion crashing down. The foundation, built on the paradox of performative kindness, was already crumbling from within, and the world was about to hear the roar. The digital murmurs that had circulated for years became a roaring tsunami in the summer of 2020. The catalyst arrived not as a slow-burning investigation, but as a seismic event that would permanently shatter the Be Kind empire. With the COVID-19 pandemic forcing the show into an unplanned production hiatus, the carefully controlled environment around Ellen DeGeneres fractured. Former and current employees, freed from the daily pressure of the set, began speaking more freely on anonymous platforms like Blind and Reddit. Their stories, no longer isolated whispers, formed a chorus of allegations describing a toxic workplace culture that stood in stark opposition to the values Ellen preached to her audience. The dam finally broke on July 16, 2020, when BuzzFeed News published its explosive investigation. Based on interviews with one current and 10 former employees, the article painted a devastating picture of life behind the scenes of America's most cheerful television show. The allegations were specific, numerous, and directly contradicted everything the Ellen brand represented. Staffers described a culture of fear, where they were fired for taking medical leave or attending family funerals. They spoke of racial microaggressions and comments from top executives that led to the systematic sidelining of Black employees. Most damningly, they alleged that the show's fun atmosphere was a carefully constructed facade masking a high-pressure, punitive environment, where employees lived in constant anxiety about losing their jobs for minor infractions. The article went viral in exactly the way the earlier whispers had not. In the 60 seconds it took for the link to spread across social media platforms, the Be Kind brand transformed from an inspirational motto to a hollow, cynical joke. The public's perception shifted with whiplash-inducing speed. Comment sections that were once filled with heart emojis and praise now overflowed with accusations of hypocrisy and the hashtag #CancelEllen, The cognitive dissonance became too overwhelming to ignore. The woman who had built a billion-dollar empire on kindness was now being exposed as the overseer of its opposite. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Within days of the BuzzFeed article, Warner Media announced it was launching an internal investigation into the show's workplace environment. But the story had taken on a life of its own, growing with each new revelation. In the weeks that followed, more former staffers came forward, and other celebrities began subtly distancing themselves from the Ellen brand. The machine that had protected Ellen's image for nearly 2 decades was suddenly powerless against the tide of truth-telling. When Ellen returned to her show in September 2020 after the pandemic hiatus, she opened her season with what was meant to be a career-saving monologue. "I learned that things happened here that never should have happened," she told viewers. "I take that very seriously, and I want to say I am so sorry to the people who were affected." But the performance fell flat with audiences and critics alike. Many found it defensive and scripted, lacking the genuine contrition the moment demanded. She positioned herself as a figurehead who had been let down by her staff, claiming she wasn't aware of the misconduct happening in her name. The public didn't buy it. The sheer scale and consistency of the allegations suggested either willful ignorance or complicity from someone who had built their name on being attuned to the human condition. The internal investigation concluded with the firing of 3 top-level executive producers, but the damage to Ellen's reputation was irreversible. Ratings began a steady decline as viewers abandoned the show in droves. Advertisers grew nervous, and the cultural currency Ellen had accumulated over nearly 2 decades evaporated almost overnight. In May 2021, just 10 months after the initial BuzzFeed article, Ellen announced she was ending her show after its 19th season. Though she framed it as a natural conclusion to a long run, nobody was fooled. The Be Kind empire had crumbled, unable to withstand the weight of its own contradictions. What makes Ellen's fall so particularly stunning is its completeness. Other celebrities have survived scandals, but Ellen's entire brand was built on a specific moral premise that proved false. Her story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of building an empire on a persona that can't be sustained behind the scenes. In the modern digital age, where employees have platforms to share their experiences and the public demands authenticity, the gap between public image and private reality can only remain hidden for so long. The 60 seconds that destroyed Ellen DeGeneres' reputation were merely the final moment in a collapse that had been years in the making. They represented the point when suppressed truths could no longer be contained, when the carefully constructed facade finally gave way to the reality beneath. Her legacy becomes a permanent reminder that Be Kind cannot be just a slogan to be printed on merchandise. It must be a practice lived consistently, both on and off camera. In the end, Ellen DeGeneres didn't just lose a television show, she lost the trust of the public that had believed in the kindness she sold them, proving that no empire built on a paradox can withstand the truth forever.